I think when I originally found it, I was so obsessed with figuring out like what's the right technology and like what is the ultimate answer. The more important part is to shorten the feedback loop to see how to be less wrong over time versus like, oh, I want to be right.
If you weren't working on fusion, are there other things that you want to build?
I think I really care about like solving really hard problems that are not getting enough attention that will impact significantly our civilization. Fusion is the thing that I'm convinced of, that I can add value to personally, that has the most impact.
We're here in San Leandro, California at the new stand-up facility for Fuse with CEO, founder, Btaiche. We just filmed at their incredible facility in Canada. And for those who don't know and haven't watched the main episode and should, can you give a quick rundown of what Fuse is?
So Fuse is on a mission to accelerate the world's transition to fusion energy. And so we believe that the time to commercialize fusion energy is now, and Fuse is working on technology that was initially developed at Sandia National Lab for the past 20 years, and we're working to commercialize this technology. And we just demonstrated the world's first and highest power pulse power driver ever built.
I have more questions about that, which is fantastic. But before that, I'm curious if you could kind of share your backstory. In the main episode, we talk a lot about the company and its intent, but I'm curious what yours was in founding the company.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Middle East. My father is a nuclear physicist, so when I was a kid, I was fascinated by space and really wanted to go explore it and see it for myself. And so my father told me, like, that's really hard, it's impossible, like, forget about it. But I was highly unsettled with that answer and started looking for what are possible ways to go actually interstellar. And so I stumbled upon fusion drives, so building fusion-powered rockets. And so as a 9-year-old, I just was obsessed with, like, how can we build fusion-powered rockets? And so that led me to learn a lot about fusion and, get through high school faster and have some motivation to listen to physics classes. I did my first research internship in plasma physics when I was 16-year-old at a university lab. And then I quickly realized that this is exactly what needs to happen and like what I want to be building. And as I was finishing high school, I started questioning like where's the best place for me to spend time building this technology. And while fusion power drives are long term, our humanity desperately needs clean source of energy, and fusion is the answer. So how can I best actually make that happen? So I had the path of going through academia. And by talking to multiple professors, I was not convinced at first, that was the right path. And second, fusion or energy is a huge geopolitical swayer. Whoever gets to fusion energy will have a significant influence on the world stage. And so that led me to think about what are the government doing? Where's the significant investment going? And so I learned about the advancement of technology happening in the US national labs and how critical it is to commercialize this technology and move faster. So I thought that the best way to contribute to this field and to make progress and learn was to actually get started on building a company.
I normally don't like to point out or care or index on age at all for a founder, but you started Fuse when you were 19, which is exceedingly young. You're 5 years in now, and the company's super impressive for the amount of money you raised versus what you've done. It's insane. And it seems like it's all because you've had this very clear focus and desire around energy your whole life. You've cared about this. Well, why?
I mean, energy is the fundamental way. So when you think about baseline problems, right? AI is fantastic, quantum is fantastic, but how do you power them? What's the fundamental building block that humanity needs to build technology, to have prosperity and security? And I think energy is at the fundamental, at the baseline of the Maslow's pyramid of needs. And so this felt like the single most important problem that I could be working on to unlock the next era for human prosperity and civilization.
There are a lot of energy startups, and asking for, as a layman here, there's nuclear, hydrocarbon, fusion. What made you pick fusion?
Yeah, so fusion is a really hard problem, right? So when you think about solar, there's people who have decades of experience in this technology and ready to commercialize it. And so I felt like where I could contribute the most is on building a company on a technology that's hard, that there's not a lot of people pursuing, and there was a clear value prop. So there's a lot of the other fusion companies are spin-offs from academia, but here there was, people in the government working on it, and there was no, private company commercializing at the time when we started the company. Today there are, but at the time there was not, and so I felt like there's a clear value prop, for moving fast and bringing, a different culture to accelerate the transition. But when you ask about energy in general, fusion is the highest density, energy source. So when you think about, you can replace millions of barrels of oil with just 1 liter of like hydrogen from deep water. So it's virtually like a limitless clean source and way more energy dense and efficient. It's also not geography dependent. So when you think about solar, you need to be a place where there's a lot of sun. Wind, you need to have wind. But fusion can be a baseload power source that's location independent with virtually limitless fuel. Right?
I often hear that like making a lot of energy is really exciting and great, but the real value of it is getting the energy when and where you need it, like the transportability of it or the ability to have it in store. Can you talk about sort of like your perspective on that?
Yeah, so the grid is a big problem. So we've thought a lot about it, and one of the big advantages of fusion is you can literally put it anywhere. So you want a facility in the middle of the desert or like on top of a mountain, that's location independent, and the fuel is anywhere on Earth where there's like deep water. So like deuterium is like super abundant, is in deep in our ocean. So there's essentially no reason why you cannot put an energy source next to exactly where you need it. So if you have a steel plant or a glass factory which needs a lot of power, you can put a fusion plant right next to it and directly connect it.
Very cool.
So it could be like this decentralized network of energy.
I'm curious to double tap a little bit on your like growing up and being interested in energy, interested in space travel, and like your dad's a nuclear physicist. What did you spend a lot of your time thinking about or like doing as a kid? Were you mostly just like in textbooks learning about this stuff, dreaming about future space travel with this, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I love to tinker. So I was also, I wasn't the most studious kid in the classroom, so I was always tinkering, building things, and getting kicked out for building stuff as well that I should not be building as a kid.
Like what?
Yeah, I built like a potato gun in school and was like potassium.
They banned you from. They were mad at you for building a potato gun.
Well, in the classroom as a 12-year-old.
Okay, I guess that's all right. I guess that's fine. Seems harsh.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised in like non-school, like Catholic, like non-school, so in the Middle East. So just going around the school shooting potatoes around is.
If you weren't working on Fuse, you'd be doing a potato weapons company.
Maybe. I mean, just building cool stuff. I was also a gamer, and I think gamers are like you learn a lot through gaming. There's a lot of coordination and you have to really perfect like what you're doing. Did a lot of sports as well, and I think all of those were core skills that made me want to, at the same time be pretty technical, but also pursue something with a lot of grit.
I'm curious what games you played a lot. You feel like shaped the way you think.
So I play a lot of Counter-Strike as well as like Dota. So actually, it was in our family, like started like network games in the basement in our family yard.
High tick rate, high response rate, move really quickly, kind of mindset from that, I suppose. Cool. All right. I'm curious. It's like that joke of like Factorio CTO, Age of Empires CEO, and I guess like Counter-Strike founder is also a pretty fair one. So I'm curious if you could walk through the story behind I believe 3 or 4 main machines, test facilities you built in your Canada facility. It was like too hard to film it all. It was like one of the longest S3s I've ever filmed because there was so much stuff to film, as well as having to wrap the camera in copper so it didn't get irradiated. But I'm curious if you could walk through the like why Magical Unicorn, why did you build that, why did you build the next thing, and what the story was with each of those.
Yeah, so great question. So when we started out, the single thing we were focused on is like getting to fusion power. Like that's why we created companies. We didn't care much about what's the approach that's going to get us there. And I don't have a PhD, and I'm very lucky with the team that we brought. Even though they spent decades working on fusion, they were not married to one concept. And so we started out with Magical Unicorn, the first machine. It's all in pulse power, so we're still building on the same skills. But that machine, we fired around 3,000 shots and realized, we were not getting the data we actually wanted to, that was promising enough for us to continue on this path. And so this led us to evolve in our technical knowledge and say, okay, this is really interesting, but we don't believe it's going to get us to fusion power. So let's take all the learnings from pulse power that we got and then apply them to the next machine. So we've been able to iterate really fast. We've done in 1 year what take decades in other places to do, and was a fraction of the cost. And so this has been our evolution of, we care about getting to fusion power, and what's the path to get there? That's why we're building and iterating. We want to learn and adapt and make sure that we're always on the, fastest and most practical path to get to limitless fusion power.
So how did you do it that fast and cheap?
We vertically integrated, so we got a team of engineers who, a lot of the team, the first credibility goes to the team. So we have people living on site, literally, they live, work, sleep, and eat. It's like
you have sleep
30.
pods and all this stuff. Yeah.
It's like 30 seconds commute from your house to your workshop. So that helps a lot, and I'm very grateful for it. A dedicated team that's really working, hard.
How did you go about building that culture though? Because a lot of startups, we're startup mentality, but very few actually employees are sleeping at the facility, living and breathing it that deeply. I'm curious, how did you go about building that?
I was doing that myself. I used to sleep under the desk initially and just obsessively work about something. And eventually, when we were getting started, we had pretty scarce resources. And so we would pick the people who really wanted to do this. And as part of the interview, I was how do you spend your Friday night? What's your Sunday plans, or what's your Saturday plans? We would hire people who on Friday night or on Saturday, they're I have a garage, in my house, and I'm going to tinker or launch something. And so we got people who really, that's all they wanted to do.
Awesome.
And the last point is we also vertically integrated. So we have a machine shop, we have an electronic assembly. So we have a space where it's literally, I'd say a playground, but another word, it's everything you need, or most of what you need in order to be able to solve a problem that you have in-house directly.
Yeah.
So you need a part, you just go to the machine shop, which is 10-second walk, make it, and then put it back. If you need a circuit, you can just, solder and build a circuit and then bring it back. So we have much less reliance on external suppliers for, critical problems that usually would slow down in months or weeks.
I feel like most people who have an interest in something very deeply, especially when they're younger, have a deep interest in fusion, and the dream is to go work for the lab, or the dream is to go study this. It's rare that people then are really hard problem that isn't fully solved. Let's found a company to go solve it. That's a pretty rare response to something as hard as fusion. I'm curious what your thinking was around that. How did you get to that point? And was there any worry? Were you did that concern you at all?
Yeah, to be honest, when I started, first, the personal risk was not as high as I thought it would be in other places. What's the worst case? I worked on 1 year and then I have to go apply for college, and that's a hell of a story. So that's one. But the most important thing is, even to order, a vacuum chamber, or even a pump, an Edwards pump, we can order it in a week on eBay and get it delivered to our facility in Canada, to be clear. And that allowed us to move way faster than if I was a national lab, I'd probably wait 6 months to get approval to buy an Edwards vacuum pump.
Sure.
Versus if we're starting a company, in those 6 months we built literally a whole complete machine, and so that was a path to move much faster. And I think when you have a problem with high uncertainty, the most important thing is what's your iteration cycle and feedback loop timeline. And so we wanted to shorten that to as fast as we can, to months instead of years, and eventually weeks instead of years.
I'm curious, I always like asking people this, who are closely with governments or adjacent to the government and labs. I feel like there's been the sort of arteries of at least the US kind of system, whether it's innovation, spending, everything, just becomes very clogged and inefficient. I'm curious if you kind of share that view, and if so, how do we fix that? How do we make that better?
Absolutely, especially in this nuclear enterprise. On the DoD and the NASA, NASA's created the COTS program. The DoD has created, different innovation networks that are not perfect, but they're moving forward. The NNSA has not yet worked with the private sector or the commercial sector to accelerate their timeline. And so we see this like way worse in the nuclear enterprise than in other agencies. So take all the problems that you've heard from other people and multiply them for the nuclear enterprise. But we're very happy. We've seen Sandia and the NNSA publish a request for information last month to ask for a public-private partnership model that's inspired by the COTS program for NASA to build the next generation of pulse power machines. So we're very excited to see some movement in that direction, but definitely we need to create more synergies between the public sector as well as the commercial sector in order to beat the competition and make sure that we stay ahead of this critical technology.
Cool. This next question is a little weird, but I like asking it to founders. Can you try to describe how you think? Like, how do you think your brain sort of works and processes ideas or information or problems?
Yeah. I think there's different mental models for different situations, but I generally try to always think of what's the worst case scenario and kind of build up from there. If it was a decision-making framework, if it was a technical problem, I just try to bring it down to what's the undergrad or high school physics engineering level, and then kind of rebuild back up from there. So try to really simplify and distill the problem to what are the core base premises that are being made here for which we can build up back on and see where have we made assumptions that may need to be changed or adapted. Because a lot of times when you talk to people who have been working on the same field for 20 years, you just have made a lot of assumptions along the way. So anything that they do new is kind of incremental. But when you want to take something radically different, it's important to see what are assumptions that have been made along the way that have not been revisited maybe in 10, 20 years.
I'm curious what you feel like some of the biggest things you've learned since founding have been.
I mean, this sounds really simple, but it's actually, I think, more true today than it used to be 5 years ago or than when I read it in textbooks, of how important is the team and the culture. And I know that's not something definable in a sentence, but really every hard problem, the way to solve it is to have the right people with enough resources and the right amount of time with urgency to solve it. And anything is solvable. Historically, we've done, we've landed man on the moon, we've done the Manhattan Project. We've done things that are unthinkable by just having enough people, with capital and time to actually make it happen. And so, now when I think about the company is, we have the mission to commercialize fusion energy, but how can we make sure we have the right people and then we're well resourced? And that's why we're building a sustainable company with, very lucrative business model and keeping the right urgency. If you told me today, here's $1 billion, go build the facility, would you do it? I would tell you, no, I need to go through my steps to actually de-risk and make sure that the team has urgency. We work on 6 to 12 months timelines. We don't work on 5-year timelines.
Very cool. So did you have that opinion when you originally founded?
I think when I originally founded, I was so obsessed with figuring out what's the right technology and what is the ultimate answer. And I think that's really important to have a strong opinion, but the reality is the more important part is to shorten the feedback loop to figure out, how to be less wrong over time versus I want to be right? And so to minimize, the amount of wrong decisions you make, the faster and more decisions, the more checkpoints you have, the better. And so now I feel I'm way more focused on how can we be less wrong and have the right people to steer us and save a lot of time.
So it sounds like a lot of that just comes from hiring really well. You're talking about, we interview people and ask what do they do on Friday nights, what are they doing on Sundays, and we're looking for people who are working and tinkering on things. Outside of hiring, how do you build that culture and that sense of urgency with the team?
I think it's important to also, so there's one which is working really hard, being passionate, etc. But there's a sense of mission and duty, right? This is beyond something that you're doing for your own resume or for pleasure seeking. This is more fulfillment seekers, and we're working on something that's bigger than any one of us individually or our own life. And so having this sense of duty and mission and working on something for, that's critical for maintaining, the West leadership and critical technology and the values of, freedom and self-reliance that we all really enjoy. This is the mission. And if we don't, there's adversaries out there that are putting a lot of resources and working, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week to actually go build this technology. And so having the sense of duty and mission is really important. And urgency comes from, if we don't, then what's going to happen? We literally are going to have an adversary that is the new source of energy and then have a significant influence on the world.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit further for those who don't know, kind of the concern of other people working on this kind of stuff and the risk it poses?
Yeah, so China committed to build exactly what we're building. They put $2.4 billion, and then they put one of their most decorated, scientists to be in charge of the project. And, if China gets there first, that's a big problem. First, that unlocks a lot of technologies. They can power AI centers, data centers, all the other technologies that people are scared of. They will also, as I mentioned, energy is GDP per capita. And if you have the best source of clean, limitless energy, that impacts, energy independence. It impacts, your influence on foreign allies that want energy and need it and don't want to rely on external sources. So I think it's a really critical technology, and it's very important for us to get there first.
If you weren't working on fusion, are there other topics that interest you quite a bit, or other things that you want to build?
I think I really care about solving really hard problems that are not getting enough attention initially, at least, that will impact significantly our civilization. And I think at the moment, fusion is the thing that I think has the highest impact on both, prosperity of humanity, but also on the clean energy future, but also on our national security. And I think there's a couple of other technologies that have similar impact, but for now, I think, fusion is the thing that I'm convinced of, that I can add value to personally, that has the most impact.
What do you think most deep tech startups get wrong in their approach to building?
Yeah, I see a lot of people excited about building really cool technologies and then thinking that someone will want to buy it. I think there's one assumption of because it's deep tech, someone's solving a really hard problem, then if they the only bet is can they deliver, and then if they deliver, someone will buy. Especially if you're talking about DoD or national security or U.S. government acquisition, even if you have the technology today, it's usually 3 to 5 years if you're really good as an acquisition program. So I think it's really important to have a really as strong as a technology team as it is to have kind of a business development or a business team in a sense that knows how acquisition works and how to sell this technology. And I think a lot of, I know that technology is really hard, but in this industry, I think that you're selling one of the most complex enterprise deals. Because your enterprise is not just a large company; it's actually the government with restrictions, and even a lot of deep tech usually have ITAR or EAR restrictions. So there's just a lot of complexity on how you actually commercialize it. And I think deep tech companies should be thinking about that on day zero, and do the homework of learning about program of records, finding their end users, finding their customers, or finding pilot customers very early on, so you can build your prototype or your technology demonstration on par with the requirements that they have eventually.
I love that answer, very, very specific and clear, and I think would help out a lot of people, actually. The whole reason I'm doing S3 is because I feel like I want to see more people our age, your age, building really hard things, whether they're founding or working at companies, founding or researching things like this. I'm curious, sort of, if you feel there's somewhere like we want more kind of people doing hard things, important things, and if so, how do we inspire more people to do that? How do we get more people excited about this stuff and not TikTok?
Yeah, that's great. Well, first, I'm glad TikTok's is banned, so really happy for that. So when I was my first experience building a company was a nonprofit for liberating teenagers to self-learn and dare to create. So I was really passionate about this problem. How do we get more people? I think it's just to show that it's possible. And so I think the more examples and the more resources that folks can get to see this is a plausible, possible path to take, that helps. The other thing is, I remember someone once told me, you don't drop out or skip college to build a deep tech company. If you want to build a social network, that's fine, but to build a deep tech company, like that's not the path to do. And that person was not entirely wrong, but I mean, now I think I've demonstrated it differently. But what I think I learned about that and that feedback was really important, which is, it was critical for Fuse to go and hire the people with deep experience. Like we brought the former Undersecretary of Energy for Nuclear Security. We have the president of our team is retired Air Force colonel who's done billions of transaction and acquisitions with the DoD. So being able to and our chief engineer spent 25 years working on fusion. So we were able to really marry, the young and naive and energetic, energy was people who have the deep experience that it takes to build a hard company, right? And I think this is something that is really important for young people. So don't think like, oh, I'm young. That means like it's a really hard problem. Like maybe your job is just to find what value add do you bring as a young person, and go find people with experience that can complement it, and then you can create a team that can only happen in America, literally, because. Only in America. I was at the Hill and Valley Forum, and Alex Karp said something on stage. It's brilliant. He said, only in America, or in American culture, can you be extremely weird, and yet, if you deliver, still get the resources to continue building, right? And so we should be proud of, we're a nation that was built on the value of like meritocracy, and on being able to bring, a group of people that, from any walks of life, from different countries, et cetera, to come and build here. And this is something that we should continue to foster, and this is the competitive edge that we have being here. And don't think of, oh, I'm a young person, that it's only young people, I'm going to solve this. Just think like, what do I bring to the table as a young person? And there's other examples of people who have done that as young people, and then think of what are the gaps, and then go bring and bridge that.
Very based. What is your current life philosophy?
So I actually practice. So for the past 5 years, I've been learning tea ceremony from like a master in Japan, and so I hope you come by one day and have tea. I have a little tea room, and so I think a lot of the, there's a lot of ancient wisdom from just learning to do practices that like give a philosophy of life versus just reading doctrines. And I think just building daily habits of serving a cup of tea, arranging simple things around the house is really important. And I also love stoicism, and not in the reading the cover page of the misconceptions of what that is. But I think marrying both like a tea life from like Asian culture as well as the stoicism. So both ancient cultures, how to continue to build them into life philosophy today, that allows me to just live with more intention and purpose.
Practicing ancient tea ceremonies and building the energy solutions to get us to the stars. It's a great duality.
Yeah.
JC, thanks for letting me check out your facility in Canada and here, and taking the time to interview, and thanks for building Fuse.
No, thanks for doing the work you do. It's very appreciated and meaningful.
Thanks, man.
Thank
cool.
you.
We did it.
Yeah,
dude,
thank you.
This was awesome. Thanks for taking the time to do it.